Hey guys, Wyatt Claypool here. I absolutely love this story today because I absolutely hate the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. It is Canada's faux neutral public broadcaster who has always basically been a Liberal Party front group, or at least for most of the last 2 decades, they have acted as a Liberal Party front group. They were very arrogant in assuming that they were never going to get called out by a higher level employee in their organization. We've known for a long time as conservatives that they have been politically corrupt, but they've always had some level of plausible deniability, or they've at least gaslit you into thinking that you're just seeing and hearing things that they're not actually saying. They're not pushing liberal messaging, they're just playing it down the middle, and you just happen to not like that. Well, that narrative was completely shredded by an ex host leaving the organization and calling them out for political corruption on the way out. This is turning into a big scandal. The opposition in Parliament, including the Conservatives, NDP, and Bloc, are probably going to jump on board for an investigation. And I hope this will actually result in either the CBC's reputation being shredded or the government actually cutting their funding. I am very skeptical that the Liberals would ever cut their funding because, hey, it's their front group. Why would they cut funding to it? But at the very least, this should set up Canadians who are in the middle to realize why the Conservatives have been pushing to defund them for years now. But, anyways, before I get into the details and some of the really petty things the CBC is doing to attack the whistleblower, I just want to remind you guys, hey, if you like the show, make sure to leave a like on it. Subscribe if you are not yet a subscriber. We are trying to hit 100,000 subscribers by mid December of this year. And leave a comment on what you think about this story. Now, let's get into it. There's going to be a lot of details, so forgive me if I mess up a little bit here and there. I do this all in one take. So, Travis Dhanraj was a host of his own show at the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. And I'm just highlighting this headline right here because it really demonstrates just how petty things were inside the CBC. He was somebody who was genuinely trying to be a neutral reporter of the news. I don't know if he leans left. I don't know if he leans right. Maybe he's politically agnostic. But his lawyer has come out and said that if he wanted conservative voices on the show, like genuine conservative voices, not Fred Delory, not Andrew Coyne, red Tories who believe in nothing other than a few fiscally conservative policies, when he wanted genuine conservative voices on, it would get vetoed. When he wanted to actually, take a story in a direction that would have been more neutral, that would have given a good hearing to the conservative position, the liberal position, it was always skewed to having liberal experts on. Take a quote here or there from a conservative MP, then have an expert on from some communist department at a university who's going to tell you that basically the liberals or the NDP's right. And so don't listen to those, right wing crackpots over there. We're degreed people. We have PhDs, not like those people. They only have that dirty common sense thing. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that, a liberal can't be right about something or that, common sense is purely conservative, but there has always been a problem at the CBC that we've been observing for a long time of, the CBC pretending to be neutral in their articles or actual televised reporting, saying, some left-wing thing, experts say. They're not saying it, just this expert saying it who works for the Canada Anti-Hate Network or Press Progress, or they come from some very left-wing liberal arts department at a university. It's not neutral reporting. It's under the guise of neutrality because the reporter's not saying the opinion, but they always go to the lefty for the opinion. And now, before I get into what the CBC is now trying to do to Travis Dhanraj, who is absolutely brave, again, I don't know what his political persuasion is, but he is being a patriot right now by calling them out. I want to show you some headlines, some articles from the CBC, the type of people that these guys highlight. Check out this headline right here. This says, this teacher quit his day job for TikTok. So can you make a living on social media? And the subhead is making money through an online presence is harder in Canada, but doable. This is from May 3rd, 2025. And who are they talking about? Steve Boots, a socialist, borderline communist TikToker turned YouTuber who used to be a public school teacher in Saskatchewan. That's who they're going to go to talk about just how it's like being a social media influencer and making money on that with that. You're not talking about politics online. Now, that's fine. Do they ever interview other conservative people? No, they write hit pieces on them. Let's find somebody else that they've promoted. Here is another article where they cite this man. It's an article titled "News Influencers Are Changing How Canadians Stay Informed for Better or Worse." And one of the main people they cite is this man, Frank Dominic, who is again a very far left creator who in fact justified the murder of the healthcare CEO in the United States by Luigi Mangione. He'll claim I'm lying about that, but at the time he said, well, I'm going to justify why people don't feel bad for United Healthcare CEO, a father who was shot twice in the back by some communist brat. That is the type of person that the CBC is going to highlight on how, TikTok and social media is changing the flow of news. By the way, Frank Dominic here has basically no followers. He's not even a very popular guy. Go check out his YouTube channel. There's nothing there. His Apple podcast, I think, has 5 reviews. And on TikTok, his numbers are very mediocre compared to someone like Mario Zendaya or other people who are actually far more successful on TikTok. I'd at least give Steve Boots, he has good YouTube viewership and good TikTok viewership. Frank Dominic doesn't have much, but he is liked by people inside the CBC. He also has articles where he was attacking parents. This is the Toronto Sun report on this. He was attacking parents who didn't want him teaching socialism and gender theory to their children when he is supposed to be, their social studies teacher or English teacher. He doesn't even have the right to be teaching anything about history, but he starts teaching left-wing nonsense in his classroom, and they just have to put up with it. But again, these are the people that the CBC thinks are credible individuals to be citing. But now there's some other stuff I could highlight, but I want to talk about what the CBC has been doing recently to try and discredit Travis Dhanraj. This is extremely petty. So check this out right here. This headline says, Dunrage still employed, CBC says, despite going public with resignation. And this has been reported elsewhere as well. The CBC will not let Travis Dhanraj quit because they don't want him quitting on the narrative it was because of political corruption, which it absolutely is. He is telling the public that's why he's leaving, but they will not let him leave. I want to find the other headline I think was a little bit better on this. It's not just that he hasn't resigned yet because he's a big old hypocrite and he's trying to collect a few more paychecks. This is another headline from the National Post that says, CBC refusing to accept Travis Dhanraj's resignation over abusive work culture, lawyer says. And this here is what the CBC's public affairs individual said. He said, despite, or I'll just read the article so you can see it. Despite journalist Travis Dhanraj's very public resignation from CBC, the national broadcaster says that he is an employee. He is, quote, still an employee, although he is currently on leave, unquote, said CBC's head of public affairs, Chuck Thompson, to National Post via email on Wednesday morning. Dunrage's lawyer, Catherine Marshall, told National Post that the CBC is refusing to accept his resignation. Quote, this refusal is indicative of their abusive workplace culture. However, to be clear, Travis has resigned, albeit involuntarily. We intend to commerce a human rights lawsuit, she said in an emailed statement. Now, what's going on is that they refuse to let him resign in this involuntary fashion, basically saying they have structurally prevented me from doing my job, so I must leave or else I'm basically sitting here on leave, not being able to actually do my job because I refuse to become an apparatchik of the Liberal Party. That's what's going on here. And by the way, this is not like some special case of a man who has done something wrong. They placed him on leave. He was placed on leave because he refused to basically read the scripts they were giving him, and they basically labeled him a bad employee. In another article that I was reading yesterday, they were so petty, like not allowing him to resign, even though like it is an involuntary resignation, but in a position like this where they're not letting you do your job and you're on leave, It is basically you having to resign to be able to actually go pursue real work, or else they're just keeping you on hold. In another article, they were so petty as to remove his name from his show just to slap back at him because he had gotten in fights with them over them trying to skew the editorial direction of his show. So, him attempting to have integrity on his show started getting him alienated by staff, getting basically stonewalled and trying to have the guests on that he wanted. And it got to the point where they just removed his name from the show to show Travis Dhanraj that you don't mess with people like us. And in part, why they got mad at him was because he had tweeted out about Katherine Tate, the current CEO of CBC, getting a massive salary for effectively doing nothing and blowing massive amounts of money from the CBC on bonuses for executives and other high-ranking employees. Now, I want to bring this up from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation because this is not. This absolutely has to do with the corruption on the political level in terms of the political corruption of their coverage. So this article from Franco Terrazzano says taxpayers to Tate no bonus or severance payouts, and they say down here, Tate's salary, Katherine Tate, the CEO of CBC, her salary is between $422,000 to $497,000 per year, according to a federal government order in council. For comparison, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's salary is $406,000 a year. Now, that is not at all disconnected from the Liberal Party corruption of the CBC. Do you think that somebody is going to effectively, it is a Liberal Party slush fund? This is why they're mismanaging money. To loyal Liberals, you can get a high-ranking job at the CBC and make massive amounts of money out of it. Why do you think these most loyal government employees around the country suddenly get contracts for $250,000 a year or $500,000 a year and you don't know what they do? Or they do something that nobody in their right mind would actually think anyone should be getting paid for. And at the CBC, yes, they need a CEO, but should you be absolutely raking in cash to just manage what is a entity that hasn't made any money of its own in decades? The CBC is just a money hole for taxpayer dollars to fund hack journalists who, again, just put out reports that are trying to favor the Liberal Party. Now, the CBC is not exactly press progress. It's not exactly the anti-hate network. It isn't the TIE, though many of those get government money as well, but those are very obvious left-wing front groups. The CBC is a Liberal Party front group in a very insidious way. You really can't tell that they're liberal when you read a few of their reports. If you catch the pattern of them reporting things with the silly experts say tactic of saying something left-wing, but saying, well, it wasn't us saying it, it's this guy over here, it gives the reader the impression that this is truly a neutral publication, because no host is never ever just going to stand up and just say, well, the Liberals are right. It will just be that the panels are always stacked with more eloquent Liberal speakers and weak conservatives, or the experts they always cite have left-wing ideas. Maybe they're even NDP individuals, but when it comes down, at the end of the day, Canadian politics is a fight between conservatives and Liberals. So whether you have an NDP professor on or some communist or Green Party official, they're still effectively bolstering left-wing narratives in which the Liberal Party is the most accessible left-wing party to vote for in Canada. And again, everything always goes to the idea that the Conservatives have the experts against them. The Conservatives said this, but this expert says this. And I wanted to show you this clip from CBC's Power and Politics that I think perfectly highlights the way the CBC effectively acts like a front group for the Liberal Party. They will front-run policies in order to see if they're popular, to see if they can get Canadians on board. They will work kind of in tandem. Liberals want to potentially raise taxes. CBC will have a panel of people talking about should we raise taxes to see what the effect would be or see what the public reaction would be. I'll get to that in just a second. I want you to check out this Power and Politics panel right here, where they are effectively trying to groom Canadians into the idea that they need to sacrifice more for government priorities.
Today, they made the point that this is not about cutting a bunch of jobs. It's about rebalancing things, retirement, and as people leave, and you could move people from Department A to say defense because that's going to be a big priority. But they also said they wanted to bust the current cycle or change the current cycle of budget building where departments just come in with a wish list and count on the finance department to find the cash. They're trying to put a culture of rigor throughout all the departments in this process.
Yeah, there will be a necessary change in orthodoxy. I'm reminded of what happened with Jean Chrétien, who, when you ask Mark Carney who the leaders are that he respects, Jean Chrétien is one of them, Stephen Harper is another one because of discipline. And when he talked about Mr. Chrétien was fiscal discipline. 30 years ago, Jean Chrétien, more than 30 years ago, was sitting in Stornoway just before he was elected, and they had policy experts invited into Stornoway, and they asked him, what are your 3 priorities once you get into government? He said, keep our independence from the United States, maintain Canadian unity, and keep the IMF from taking over the Canadian economy. Now, we have a United States independence problem.
Yeah.
They are.
We have a unity issue too.
We have a unity issue as well. We also have Canadians who are doing the kinds of things that the government is about to do now. Canadians, if you look at real estate listings, Canadians are buying fewer homes.
Yeah.
They're borrowing less money. They're not going on vacation the way they used to. They're staying home. They're selling their vacation.
What they're doing here, if you're not seeing what's happening, is that they're setting up the idea that you, with this hacky liberal economist on the panel, that you are going to have to just put up with the fact that the liberals are going to cut service funding at the same time they're going to increase funding to other departments that Mark Carney is trying to build his re-election campaign on. He's trying to run on the idea that he is going to greatly increase Canada's defense spending. He is going to increase infrastructure spending and move money towards his modular home projects and the auto sector and subsidizing different Canadian industries that he's trying to protect from the US tariffs, even though he's screwing up trade negotiations right now. They're basically saying, so Canadians are already tightening their belts. The government's now going to tighten its belt, but it's not. It's not going to do that. So it's saying that, you know how you're suffering, well, the government's suffering too. And so just realize that your service spending is about to go down. Now, I think the government budget is bloated, but none of this is going towards trying to hand taxpayer money back. In fact, they're floating on other media outlets the idea of increasing the GST, like the Globe and Mail was pitching through Stephen Chase.
Properties in the United States. Canadians seem to be prepared for sacrifice. How much sacrifice is yet to be tested? We're going to find out. Even Mr. Chrétien, who won plaudits, paid a price in 1997 in Atlantic Canada in particular, where he lost several seats for this.
Yeah.
The difference is Chrétien actually cut taxes massively. He actually got the economy restarted by getting the government out of the way. Is Carney doing that? I don't see any real indications. I know that he's floating the idea he may approve a pipeline, but there's so many maybes and I mights and I could do's in the statements he puts out. My confidence level is not super high. Even if he approves one, it's years away. I still want a pipeline. I will cheer anyone who creates a pipeline. But the rhetoric that comes out of the CBC on a daily basis is always the idea that, hedge your expectations now, that you may have to sacrifice a little bit more. The government might have to cut some service spending to you to give you taxpayer money back, to cut people's taxes. They're cutting people's taxes by 1% under $50,000. In which you don't even pay any taxes on the first $18,000. They're giving you $300 back. And then they're going to be increasing the industrial carbon tax. They're going to be putting in place a carbon border adjustment, basically a carbon tax tariff. And then they also may, like the Globe and Mail has been floating, potentially thinking about it, don't hold us to it, we may increase the GST. What do you guys think? This is why the CBC is awful. Everything they do is just to either, soften the blow of bad things the liberals do or pump up any good things they do. And basically downplay conservative criticisms by always having an expert around to say why the conservatives are actually very bad. We see it constantly. All the articles basically accusing the conservatives of having far-right connections because a guy was shaking another guy's hand, experts say. But yeah, I hope the CBC goes down over the next few years. It's an awful organization. It gives Canadians absolutely no utility unless bad news coverage and terrible sitcoms is your bread and butter in life. Anyways, so that should be it for me today, guys. Thanks for watching the show. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, do all that great stuff, and I will see you guys all later.